Understand something, guys. Nothing worth ever having in this world comes easy.
Do what these champions doing if you're going to be a champion.
You control your outcome.
Who am I?
I'm a champion.
What up, champs, and welcome back to a brand new breakdown powered by Biosteel. As always, I'm your host, Adrian, with my co-host,
Sylvie.
Still can't say my name right, even though I'm almost 3 decades old. Adrian. Sorry, Mom and Dad. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. As always, we're breaking down a brand new topic, health, wellness, fitness. And today we got a fun one. I'm excited about this one.
Me
right?
too. So,
this week we are talking about the polar bear plunge. Did you have one of those growing up as a kid in the ocean? Yeah, we had one too at the Biosteel Festival. The polar bear plunge, they would cut out a section of ice and then people would go and jump in, and then they would get in hot tubs and, I don't know, drink warm mulled wine or something like that. and it was an event for the community. But we are talking about cold water immersion, cold therapy, hydrotherapy, and just a couple of different options or opinions. So lastly, we're going to talk about athletic performance, but they've also started linking cold therapy to a bunch of different things, like specifically inflammation, mood, and your immune system. So we'll touch on those three, and then we'll wrap up with athletic performance, because I think that's what everyone thinks about it as, right? Like I'm sure when you were in university.
Yeah, you think that you picture the football player doing the cold bath.
Exactly.
After a game.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In relation to mood, there is some pretty significant anecdotal evidence, and then there's also a pretty sound theory showing cold showers improving mood, and specifically with depression. So obviously depression's a scale, and where you are on it will affect what kind of treatment you need. But in certain instances, they're seeing mood improve and then depression symptoms improve as the result of frequent cold showers. And so the mechanism behind this is kind of the same mechanism behind a lot of these other things. But what happens when you are submerged in cold water is that you trigger the release of norepinephrine and dopamine in your brain. And they've done this with both longer cold immersion treatments. So like an hour at 40 degrees or 45 degrees. And then they've also done it with shorter cryotherapy treatments and or like plunges, like 20-second plunges at like 4 degrees Fahrenheit. So they've done it with a variety of different times and lengths, and played with different core temperatures. And so when we have a decrease in norepinephrine, we see an increase in depression. And so they've done this like clinically with animals and with people, where they've inhibited the release of norepinephrine, and then they've created these emotions and feelings. And so if we have a spike in norepinephrine, it makes sense that we would have a decrease in the negative effects that we're seeing. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, for those of you who don't know, norepinephrine is a stress hormone.
Correct. Yes. And it functions as both the stress hormone and a chemical release, right? So it does both, which is good because it's essentially the driver behind all these things. So the second thing is inflammation, and inflammation, like stress, is a necessary response in the body. But if we are constantly in a state of inflammation, and this is something you talk about all the time still, and there's nothing actually dangerous attacking us, we're going to run into some significant issues. And so our constant state of chronic stress is kind of a driving force behind that. Inflammation is responsible for aging. It is associated with almost all age-related illnesses. There's an increased rate of injury when you have inflammation. So it's very, very significant. And again, the role of the release of norepinephrine will decrease the inflammation within our body. And so it limits the biochemical process and the biomechanical process that creates additional inflammation and kind of heads it off. It's a simplistic way to put it. But norepinephrine inhibits it, and so as a result, we can't create as many chemicals in our body that increase our overall inflammation levels. They've also seen with specific issues, so arthritic joints, both like as a global scale, and then on the specific joint, they're seeing a decrease in pain and a decrease in arthritic symptoms as a result of cold immersion, and that's lasting like within up to 72 hours, I believe, after the treatment. So we're seeing both local inflammation decreases with the specific joint, and then on the broader scale within the body. which is really, really important. And then the last one that's kind of off topic, I guess, not off topic, but atypical of what we think about with cold water therapy and immersion is the immune system. And so when you were a kid, your parents always told you to bundle up or you'll go outside and catch a cold. At least my parents always did. And when you would try and leave the house without your winter jacket zipped up, they would come and zip it up all the way to the top. And so, of course, they were right. You don't want a kid to catch some sort of hypothermia. But in terms of being cold and catching a cold, they may have been wrong. And so they're seeing a lot of research now showing that when you are immersed in cold water, your body creates a surplus of immune cells, specific immune cells. And those having that nice healthy body of immune cells helps you fight off infection and fight off disease. And so in certain countries, like Ireland is big for this, where they have cold water swimming, they have a really low rate of respiratory tract infections. And so they need to do more research on it. But the theory is because they're always in the water and they're exposed to this response, they have a higher immune response. They have a higher healthy body population of immune cells. And so as a result, they're not experiencing the same respiratory tract issues we are. So those are kind of like the three maybe atypical ones where we're talking about mood, inflammation, and immune system. But then, of course, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about athletic performance. And so this has been up in the air for, I would say, like, I don't know, at least the last 5 to 10 years, like whether or not it's beneficial to have a cold tub after, whether it actually decreases the results, whether it increases them. And so 3 things happen when we go into the water and we plunge ourselves in. We have vasoconstriction, we have this pain relieving effect, and then we have a reduction in the inflammatory pathways. Those are all a result of the things that we talked about earlier, the release of norepinephrine into the body. But they've seen significant research showing that it improves delayed onset muscle soreness. And so if you go for cold therapy, you are less sore in the following days. The question is, when is it appropriate? Like what activities would it be appropriate for? And then what time frame? So when should you use it? And that's the thing that I just wanted to touch on before we wrap this up. Strength training, when you're looking at specific strength training sections, it looks like it might not be worthwhile to use the cold tub, specifically within the first hour. So the responses that you're getting at that time are necessary for your body. Your body's trying to build and it's trying to create an inflammatory response that's positive. And so if we go and inhibit that, it may in fact decrease our ability to build muscle, decrease our ability to synthesize protein. And so the suggestion right now, it looks like, although more research needs to be done, is that avoid cold tubs immediately after a strength training workout, specifically within that first hour. What happens after that? That's where they need to spend a little bit more time. The scientists. The second area, though, is endurance, and that's where the results are significantly more positive. And so in those studies, they're seeing an increase in mitochondrial production with cold water therapy, and then they're also seeing an increase in performance on repeat exercises. So if you were in the Tour de France and you were cycling day after day after day, they're seeing less of a drop off in performance on secondary, tertiary days. And so if you're an endurance athlete, it looks like it might be much more worthwhile to spend some time in the cold tub, specifically if you're going to compete or have hard workouts several days in a row or several times within a week.
2 questions.
2 answers.
Specific temperature, like what's too cold? What is there research done on
both?
Okay.
So it can be a higher temperature, longer exposure. So I think in those studies they were going like 40 to 45 degree Fahrenheit, something like that. And they were, 40 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit, and they were having that over a longer period of time, like 40 minutes. They had some studies looking at 20 degrees over an hour, and then they had some studies looking at cryo, where the temperatures are very, very cold over a short period of time, like 30 seconds to 2.5 minutes. So it looks like you can get benefits from both. Yeah,
that was my next question. Time.
You can get benefits from both.
Time frame of getting the benefits, and do you have to fully submerge your head?
No, you don't have to.
That's what I'm.
But no, you don't have to submerge your head fully. But depending on how far you're submerged to, will affect like what sort of blood flow you get in the body. Right. And so they're seeing different benefits based on different levels of submersion. A lot of them have been just with the lower body. But I would say, especially if you're looking at something like an endurance athlete, like you've probably spent the majority of the time using your lower body. So it would be more valuable to have that section submerged.
What about submerging your thyroid? I've heard that before. Like,
truthfully, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Interesting. Just an interesting.
I would not. I would just be taking a guess, and I'm not even sure how I would hypothesize that.
Well, we'll get back to you on that.
On the thyroid submersion, yeah, maybe that's worthwhile exploring. But anyway, cold water therapy, you should do it. It's also good mentally. Something to be said for making yourself go in cold water and sit there. So that's a wrap. That was long and sciencey. Anything else?
That's it.
Check back next week. Brand new breakdown. As always, head over to the website, biosteel.com. Use the code word
Champ Lifestyle, capital C, capital L.
Grab 15% off, and we will be back next Friday with a brand new episode.